Hi mate, how are you?
Good, Joe. How about yourself?
Yeah, good. Let me just put the video on here.
Too easy.
Yeah, right. Okay.
There we go. Do you want to maybe just there we go. Perfect, perfect framing. How are you going? I love the wog drapes in the background.
Oh, mate. Yeah, I know. It's the house we live in.
It's beautiful. I love it. It's my mum's got the exact same ones. Man, I grew up in Sunshine West in the western suburbs, and
All right.
she's got those. So
What's your
very familiar.
background?
Macedonian, mate.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Hence the ski in my surname.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Cool.
Um, saw you on when was it? Friday night. Great
Oh, yeah, Sam was
show.
saying.
Yeah, yeah. Was it like
Where was
450
Friday? Where was it?
Comics Lounge?
Comics Lounge. Yeah, yeah, cool, cool. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
good gig. It wasn't a bad gig. That one, it got a bit funny at the end, but after I did the rant, then it normally picks up from there, but it went down. Funny.
Yeah. Depends on the audience, I suppose. Sometimes the
Yeah,
rant
most
can
of the
be,
people are fine with it. It's just that I don't know. Maybe it was a
yeah.
full on for that crowd because normally people like it. But anyway, all
Yeah.
good.
Well, I was cheering you on, mate, from the back of the room, mate, when you went on your rant. So, do you have any questions before we get into it today?
No, no. So how long are we talking?
Well, we booked for an hour. I don't know how much time you actually have.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. About an hour. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Because kids
perfect.
coming home from school and then I've got to go out and then I'm getting ready to fly to Sydney tomorrow. So
Yeah, you go. What is it, Wollongong tomorrow night?
yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of skis in Wollongong, mate.
mate. There's no shortage of skiers and no shortage of burek as well. So get yourself some burek while you're down there.
Oh, right. Okay.
All right, man. Well, let's keep rolling and go
Yeah.
right on into it. So, as I said, saw your show at the Comics Lounge on Friday night, and this is part of your "When I Was Your Age" world tour. How many
Yeah.
shows are you doing on this tour, Joe?
The last year was 157. This year was probably 120, 130, maybe. I haven't really counted them, but
Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, two what two 150, yeah, 170, 180, 280, maybe something like that over 2 years.
yeah. You're
Yeah,
up there with Guns N' Roses on their User Illusion World Tour. That was about 200 shows.
was it? Wow, I didn't know that. That's
There you
cool. You got
go.
a Def Leppard shirt though on.
Oh yeah, Def Leppard shirt. Had my Iron Maiden shirt on for this morning's podcast. So I'm just cycling through all the t-shirts, mate. But
All
that's
right.
how do you maintain that? I mean, this was a question I had reserved for later on in the show, but how do you maintain the energy to play so many shows over, say, such a relatively short amount of time?
It's only an hour and a half, mate.
Yeah,
Everyone asks me that. I'm like, what? I'm just standing there talking for an hour and a half. It doesn't.
it is
It
an hour and a half, but it's a lot of traveling. Like when I travel, I get
doesn't
kind of over. You're traveling from place to place. You're playing late at night. Oftentimes, sometimes you're doing a matinee, so you might be doing two shows.
yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't think there's a lot of stuff that I do that I just don't think about. And it's not just with the traveling, there's a lot about my career. A lot of
mm,
people ask me that same question about the energy. They ask me also, um, what do you do to psych yourself up before a show? If you spend a lot of time with me backstage, you'll know that I'm probably sleeping before a
mm,
show. So
mm,
someone will wake me up or I'll set an alarm 5, 10 minutes before. It's not like I've got to do my hair and away I go. I don't think about it, and sometimes I think maybe should have I thought about more about what I'm doing, and I don't need to. I just do what I got to do, and that's just a product of the way that I grew up. I went to 4 primary schools, I went to 3 high schools. I just did what I had to do. Moved home
mm.
30 times. I did what I had to do. I don't think about it, and it kind of a lot of people can't keep up with that, and I get annoyed when people can't keep up with me. You
Mm.
know, and I'm like, people are like, oh no, it's too much. Don't give me that shit.
Yeah.
I
Do,
can do it.
do,
So can you.
do you think this has anything to do with sort of the ethnic upbringing? So,
Mm.
I think about my parents, they came out here in the early 70s, no education, didn't speak a word of English, just worked hard in the factories and kind of expected me and my sister to do the same. Like they instilled the same sort of
Mm.
work ethic into us. Like, don't make excuses, just get out there, get the job done. Do you think there was
Uh,
some of that playing into the way you approach your comic?
um,
Or am I just reading into it too much?
well, it could be. No, no, you're not reading into it. It's just that I had parents that were like that, but I don't necessarily know if all of them were like that. There's certainly that. There's certainly a lot of there's certainly not a lot of that happening now with millennials and other kids. Like, so there's a friend of mine's son, and he went out. I put together a resume. He doesn't have any qualifications, but he's got guts and get up and go.
Mhm.
and he just wanted to be a mechanic in this. It doesn't matter where. He just wanted to be a mechanic. He just went to every big car place. He actually went to the top. He went, where do I want to work? And he picked that place. He went in there. They gave him a job. He didn't get a job as a mechanic because obviously he didn't have enough experience. But they said, we will give you whatever job you want, because you do not see that today. Today you see the opposite, and people don't. Everyone's just like, okay, I've done enough. That's it.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
enough.
You
Enough
see,
is not good enough to get where you want to get in life.
yeah, you see a lot more, I suppose, entitlement nowadays from the younger
Yeah.
generation, expecting
Yeah.
everything to be served on a silver platter for them.
Well, where do you think that comes from? I can tell you where that comes from, because um, our parents, worked their asses off, right? And that's rubbed off on us, but we give our kids everything, So I'm kind of in between, because I had kids very late. Uh,
Yeah.
but other people that I know, who were kind of in between me and my parents, their parents had done well, given them everything.
Mm.
And you get them to try and do stuff, and they won't. They can't. They can't. Oh no, well, because they're used to mummy and daddy doing everything. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to instill in my son, no, it's not the way life is, mate. You're not
Yeah.
going to get everyone to do anything for you. Do it
Yeah.
yourself. Come
Yeah.
on.
It's interesting
I
because
know you're 3, but do up your shirt.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, just with that, I'm going to play a quick clip from your previous special, which ties into what we're talking about here, which is kids and the new generation. So
That was our toys, and the kids today, they don't have scabs. Remember when we were at school? When we were at school, the young people, there was no bark. There was no soft asphalt. No, we used to play on one. We used to like going out on the street on the tar. Remember that? You just scrape yourself and you get a scab. There's no scabs anymore.
So, there's no scabs anymore. And as you said, Joe, you had kids later in life, which I don't know if this is a coincidence, but I think of a lot of comics like, Jerry Seinfeld, Bill Burr,
Mm,
Sebastian Maniscalco, another Italian comic, all
yeah.
had kids later in life. I don't know if that's a virtue of being a comic or just a coincidence, but,
Yeah.
raising kids later in life in this climate, trying to teach them to be more resilient. How have you tried to navigate that sort of minefield nowadays where, as you were quoted in saying, as saying in Sky News, kids used to be scared of their parents, but now it's the parents that oftentimes are scared of their kids.
Absolutely. Um, well, there's a couple of answers there. The first thing is comedians having kids late. Yeah, comedians shouldn't get married, man. We live in our own head. I didn't know I was doing it back then, but as a kid, I was very much a loner, as I am now, and I remember walking around talking to myself in my head, making observations. So Seinfeld says it, because comedians should not be married, because it's very difficult. We have this vision that a lot of people don't have. Doesn't make me better, because there's things that I wouldn't have a clue on, right? That someone else is much better than me. But we just see right through things, and it's hard to be able to live our life in conjunction with someone else. So I think we put it off as much as possible. And also, to try and find your perfect mate, you got to go through a lot of people to find someone who's going to put up with us.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. I was laughing at that clip because I totally forgot about that clip. That was recorded so long ago, and it was funny. I was just listening to it like it wasn't me, and I'm
Yeah.
right. I was thinking, yeah, the kids don't have scabs.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
you know,
Well, you're
how
talking
how
about.
do I deal with this? Look, it's actually been good for me, because
Mm.
my mind is at a certain point now where I can look at it and laugh and you know, try and see the funny side of it. So my kid's 3. He goes to this private school, and you've got that one of the dads. Have you got kids? Have you got
No
kids?
kids yet.
No, no. Okay. Well, so one of the fathers is in charge of the social, get together, and so they send out this message, and it was a, it was what was it? It was a night for far. Oh, that's right. Um, a beer and bowls night or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm looking at it going, I'm not going to no beer and bowls night. I'm not going bowling. I didn't drink beer. I'm not. It's like he's just like I just don't. I don't know. I just
Vibe with you.
doesn't vibe with me. But I thought it was really. funny. It was. I was like, I wonder if. Oh no, it was a pasta and bowl or something like that. Because I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if back home in Italy, the fathers had to get together for the grappa and bocce night or something.
Uh-huh.
Like how did they all bond together? And the other thing is, which I think there's a lot of comedy, is in imagine my dad or your dad. Because I said to my dad, but when we went to school, because some of the schooling I did was private school. I go, did you get invited to all these dad dinners and get-togethers? He goes, no, it didn't exist. We just wasn't around it. And I just think it's so funny that we have to go and sit there, with all these other dads. And I just could not imagine my dad. And Bill Burr, because you mentioned him, has got this great movie called Old Dads.
Yeah,
And that's
great
what I
movie.
am. And I've noticed at school there's a lot more older dads. So it's
Have
okay.
you, I mean, as someone, I'm 40 years old, and as I just said, no kids yet. So this is perhaps a self-interested question, but I'm sure there's many others in my audience, which is made up of a lot of creatives who are in the same headspace,
Mhm.
early 40s, perhaps no kids, not married yet. A lot of people like to make jokes about being an old dad, Bill Burr
Mm.
being one, you're older, you haven't got the energy you had when you're younger, so and so.
Yeah.
But do you think there are some benefits that come along with being an older dad with a lot more, say, life experience at your disposal?
Well, I'm sure that there is. Yes. Problem is that my wife's a millennial. Not a problem. That's just what she is. Not a problem. But so she's kind of here, and I'm here in terms of our life experiences, simply because I'm 8 years older than her. But we also have a different take. I'm a hard ass. I'm like, no, man, you get up and go to school. I don't care what's wrong. Get up and go to school. My wife's like, oh, his runny nose. Maybe he should miss school today. No,
Yeah.
no, get off and get to school. And that's who I am. But because I'm never here, I get, whatever I say doesn't really matter because it gets, and it's the same with Bill Burr. I mean, he talks about it. He talks about it when he does his podcast. He's away a lot. His wife does a lot of the heavy lifting, as does my wife. But yeah, we come home and the rules have changed. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter. You're not here.
Yeah. No, that's fair, mate. Do you ever come back from a tour and think to yourself, what have you done with the kids? They're acting weird. You've changed them.
Well, we only have one. I do have a daughter as well, but she lives in North America.
Yeah.
But she lives with her mum, so I don't do a lot of the parenting there. The mum does that, but I got a great relationship with her. We chat all the time. So yeah, but no, we try and minimize now the time that I'm away, and even with the tours, the international stuff, I do a lot of the bigger tours when I'm on my own, and we try and have to design tours these days where we have a base. So like when I do Canada, my wife and my son will come when I do the Toronto because we base ourselves in Toronto and then work all the way. That way it's not too disruptive for him. Because, last year one night was in Boston, one night Pittsburgh, one night Chicago, the next night Montreal. So 4 different major cities in 4 nights. Way too much for a 3-year-old. But in those days he was just 2.5. So it was too much for him. So you got to try and plan it around that.
Yeah. And do you find as a touring comedian, when you are away, say from the family, from the wife, if they're not with you on particular dates, some people might say that could be sort of disruptive to the relationship, but in some respects, having some time apart, she does her thing, you do your thing, it can sometimes actually be a healthy thing. How have you
It's
found that
fantastic.
play out?
No, it is fantastic. I mean, especially, as I said, comedians need to be alone. I thrive being alone. Sometimes I go on very, very long trips on my own, 6-7 hour drives. My mother-in-law freaks out. Why shouldn't someone come with you? No, I don't want anyone with me. I'm happy talking to myself in my head, listening to my podcast, listening to, my informative, everything that's going to take, I like learning. I can't stop learning. I can't watch TV. I can't watch anything that's bullshit. I can't watch a sitcom. I can't watch comedy. I find it very difficult. I can't watch movies. If I'm not learning, if it's not a documentary or some podcast where I'm constantly learning, I just can't do it. I can't even listen to music anymore. I loved music growing up, and music has served its purpose in my life, and now I can't even listen to music. So I have to be listening to something where I'm always learning. So it's great to be able to have that time apart because, I am not a person. I don't need constant people in my life or reassurance. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. I know who I am. I'm 50 years old,
Right.
been on this planet for a long time. I know what I want.
And it does echo a lot of, the research I've seen, in particular, Esther Perell, who is one of the world leading relationship coaches and authors.
Yeah.
She's got this book called Mating in Captivity, where she says
Oh, yeah.
one of the
I've
reasons
heard
a
about
lot
that.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, she basically says one of the core reasons a lot of relationships like lose their spark is because people are just in each other's pockets all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You see some of these Facebook profiles where two people merge into one, and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, Tony and Vera Kostovsky or something. And it's like, since when did you stop being individuals?
Yeah.
She says the healthiest thing you can do is maintain your own separate identities and have space and do your own
Yeah.
thing and have your own friends.
Yeah.
And then come back together where you actually miss each other and you look forward to spending time together, not just
Yeah.
being together 24/7.
Yeah, I know. I'm a big believer in that, but people cannot take that. People don't understand that concept. People think, "Oh, you don't want anything to do with me." It's not that. It's just, I want you in my life, but I need my own life. And I mean, my wife, she's really switched on. She's very smart. She's a corporate, very corporate lawyer. Really switched on. Talks languages that I just in language, not in terms of different languages, but she does a completely different level, and it's not my thing. It's her thing, and she thrives in that, and she's great at what she does.
Yeah, love it, mate. We might change gears and go back in time. So you not very obvious to our audience, but obvious to me, you were born in 74, 49 years old today. You grew up in the inner west in Sydney, so in a little place called Five Dock.
Yeah.
I actually spent about close to a year living in Petersham, so I do the bay
Really?
run
Yeah.
on the
Oh,
weekends.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Beautiful spot. Do you ever do the bay run?
I do it all the time. My parents still live in Five Dock.
Yeah.
I go there when I'm in Sydney. I miss Sydney. Jesus, it's a great city.
Yeah.
So great.
Better weather
Whereas-
better weather than Melbourne, that's for sure.
Better weather. There's a lot to do in Sydney, Melbourne's great if you're single. Family life, a bit different. It's not the Sydney's just got a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
A lot of outdoor activities. It's an outdoor. See, the difference between Sydney and Melbourne is that Melbourne people are always looking in, and they'll hold your eye, your gaze when they're having a conversation. Sydney people are like, yeah, mate, what? Yeah, okay.
Got to be somewhere.
People are always looking out. Maybe I like it because I love doing things on my own.
Yeah.
So it's a great city to do things on your own.
Yeah.
In Melbourne, it's cafes, restaurants, the footy.
Cafes, restaurants. Well, I suppose we've got the culture and the arts, the live music and the comedy and stuff. Obviously, you have comedy in Sydney too, but I don't know. I'm based down in Torquay at the moment on the Surf Coast, so for me, it's hiking and surfing and things of that sort.
Yeah.
So if you like the outdoors, it's good. Except unlike Sydney, you have to wear a wetsuit here that's bloody 5 millimeters thick because the water's absolutely freezing.
Yeah.
So growing up in Five Dock, as the son of Italian migrants from Calabria, I imagine that would have made you an Apia Leichhardt fan back in the 80s.
Oh, my father was a director of Apia Club.
There you go.
And I just did a show for their 70th anniversary. I remember going there when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
Park,
I think it's called.
Yeah, I think who was it? Like back in 87, I think Apia won the NSL. You had like Charlie Yankos and Peter Cathalos and all these superstars.
Peter Cathalos, Marshall Soper, Terry Butler.
Yep.
I remember distinctly. Obviously after the game, we'd go into the dressing room and the thing that I remembered was Denka rub, the smell of Denka rub. That was just such now when I smell Denka rub, it brings me back to those change rooms as a kid. So, I was born 74, so I would have been 1982, 81, 82 when I used to go, and it was the excitement of being in the grandstands and seeing, all the people playing. It was great. Great times.
Yeah. Those are the times when the players would open a bevy at halftime and have a cigarette. Things have changed a bit in the 4 decades since. So, sticking with the theme of being in the 80s and, early 90s even, you studied food science and obviously worlds away from comedy. Is that something that ran in the family and why the deviation away from food science to something like comedy?
Yeah. Okay. So the way that happened was because I wanted to be a rock star. Okay. That's where I was heading. Music was my thing. I wanted to be I wanted to be famous. I wanted to write songs and be in a band. Now I was in a band. I was writing songs. Terrible voice. Couldn't sing. Maybe I can sing. If I went to lessons, I might be able to pull out something. But I did a few songs for parodies. But so my dad goes, no, there's no rock stars from Calabria, mate. Just go get a real job. So at the time, we had just come out of that recession that we had to have, if you recall. And
1991, I think.
the which one?
I think it was 1991, where
Yeah.
interest rates hit like 19% or something.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, so I was finishing school in 91. And what was I going to do? My dad said, look, it doesn't matter if people don't have money or not, we always have to eat. So get a job, in food. So I enjoyed science at school. I didn't have any qualifications doing music because I was self-taught. I couldn't get into the conservatorium. I couldn't get into a uni. And my guitar teacher at the time was a guy who used to play, was one of the best guitar teachers, but he used to drive this shitty old beat up Datsun. And my dad, he'd come to our house and he'd give me guitar lessons. And so I was self-taught on the piano, but I had a few guitar lessons. I ended up teaching myself. It was a lot easier. But he would come there and then my dad would go, so this guy here is one of the best guitarists in Australia. Yeah. Have you seen the car that he drives? That's all he had to say. That's all he had to say. If he was that good, why is he driving this beat up piece of shit? Right. And it made a lot of sense. So we all decided here, my late brother and myself, we sat down. He goes, what do you want to do? I said, I like science. Well, why did you do food science? And I did it and I loved it. I topped the course, won a scholarship to do honors, got a job at Streets, was on the team to help develop Magnum in Australia. Fantastic. Good time of my life. I really enjoyed university.
Yeah, I read you wanted to be a restaurateur developing your own ice cream flavors. Is that something you still do today? Dabble in the kitchen?
I love cooking. Yeah, I love cooking. It's a real passion of mine. Although I don't get a chance to do it a lot. I don't like doing it during the week. I like doing it on the weekends with a lot of people. I like cooking for a lot of people. I get a big kick out of that. So that's going to be the focal point. We're building a house at the moment, and that's our focal point. Is there'll be a couple of kitchens in there. And I really enjoy mixing with flavors. I like to freestyle when I cook, not so much following a recipe, but I really love just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's hard to replicate. We try and remember. And of course, if you've had too many vinos, you won't be able to remember a thing.
Yeah, that's the old Nonna way of cooking, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just cook
a little bit of this, not too much of that.
Yeah. Just taste it as you go, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. So, I mean, your dad talked you out of becoming a musician because your guitar teacher essentially drove a Datsun, but comedy, essentially there's a lot of starving comics out there as well. How did your family take it when you decided to go down that path?
Right. So basically, I started comedy in my final year of university. No one had any idea that I was doing comedy, and I didn't bring anybody to a show until I was good enough for them to see me. So by the time that they knew I was even doing comedy, I had already had quite a few shows under my belt, and I was starting to make a name for myself. In fact, I started to make a name for myself that I couldn't hide it anymore. I couldn't pretend, because people would say to my dad, I saw your son at the comedy store. What do you mean my son at the comedy store? I'm just like that. I don't like to say anything. I just go and do what I got to do. I don't need, to big note myself or to have to talk about it. In fact, if anything, I'll talk down. Like now when I go to a restaurant, I sit in a corner facing the wall. When you first become famous, you sit there because your face is famous. It's a lot of fun. People recognize you. Girls come up and talk to you, blah, 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 blah. Now, not needed, done it, been there, done that. So you grow out of that. And I guess I've always had it in me. So I just did it. I did it in silence. And so he really couldn't say anything, because by the time that he saw me, I'd started getting a name. Well, what is he going to say? And now, of course, with the success that I had over the years, well, what can he say? It's like George Michael. George Michael's father used to belittle him, like really belittle him, saying, what are you doing with his singing? Get Give it up. What are you trying to go and get a proper job? And then you see him being interviewed many years later, and his father said, boys like that, kids like that don't grow on trees. Not everyone just got a voice like that. And finally, his father realized. But there was a time, if it was up to his father, if it was up to what his father said, he probably would have given up singing, and we would have missed out on one of the greatest talents of all time.
Yeah, and it's funny there what you say about his dad eventually cottoning on to the fact that his son had this, amazing voice. I'm going to play a clip here. It's a bit from your show where you talk about your dad, and once you finally made it and you're selling out concerts, his response absolutely cracked me up. So
Okay.
here we go.
Say no, and I found this compadre, 52 years of marriage, 50.
Actually, that's not the right one. Here we go.
That's not the right one.
You know what the funny thing is, though? It doesn't matter where you go in the world, what you do. I said to Dad, like, this show's been sold out for weeks and weeks, as you know. And I said to Dad, Dad, guess what? We're doing the 20th anniversary tour. And we're doing it at the Enmore, and it's sold out, thousands of people. And in true Italian fashion, my dad goes, like, are you proud, Dad? But where are the people gonna park?
Yeah, that is exactly what he said. There's a couple of things to this routine. Number one, that's exactly what he said. Number two, you've got to know the venue. So the venue is the Enmore Theatre. That's where that was recorded, in Enmore in Sydney. Now, that is notorious. And a lot of some people say, no, I'm not going there. I can never find parking. Now, there's a comedian called Sebastian Maniscalco in Chicago, had exactly the same thing happen to him. And you know how many times I get emails or people, did you steal that joke from him, or did he steal it from you? No one stole it. He's a 49-year-old Italo-American whose father is Sicilian, who's got an attitude. I'm a 49 Italo-Australian whose father's from Calabria, who's got an attitude. We both performed in a venue which was terrible for parking. I mean, you couldn't do that joke, where there's in a show where there's a lot of parking. I don't know the guy. I'd never seen his shows until he came to Australia. He certainly didn't do that joke then. That is just an observation. And of course, the people laugh. Why are they laughing? Because their fathers would have done the same. So it really annoys me when people think, you've stolen that material. Or people go, did he steal it from you, or did you steal it from him? And of course, I write back that neither of us did. That's just the way it is. Because we have fathers who are like that. Your father would have said the same thing to you, Steve. But okay, it's good. He said, but the people, where are they going to park?
Yeah, and that's perhaps why your comedy, does transcend those cultural sort of, not cultural barriers, but more so geographic borders, whereby you're playing to audiences in Canada, in the US, in Australia, in the UK, and essentially a big chunk of your fan base are ethnic Americans, ethnic Australians, because they can totally relate to this. The energy of the Sicilian dad in Chicago is the same as the Calabrian dad from Five Dock.
Yeah, exactly right. In Belgium, I do shows we do shows in South Africa, Italy this year. So they all relate, all of them. Although I get the most amount of abuse that I've ever copped from Italians in Italy. Don't like what I do. I'm not all of them, some of them. Some of them do. I've never had abuse in my career. I've never done anything to really get abused. Every now and then, some of the older generation would say, you're taking the piss. Never have I encountered that much abuse as I have verbal abuse from people in Italy. And not just keyboard warriors, because, keyboard warriors, you just know the kind of abuse that they put out rubbish, just, you're not funny, you're as funny as, you're as funny as cancer, they just say just ridiculous things. These are people who are passionate about hating me, and because Italians do not like being taken the piss out of in Italy. The ones here don't mind. They understand, they get where it's coming from. Not all of them. There's them, because obviously I'm doing shows. I wouldn't be doing shows in Italy if that was the case. But, interestingly enough, the most amount of abuse I've ever copped is from Italians.
Really? I mean, can you give us some sort of examples? Like what kind of...
one guy said that he wanted to hang me from a cross outside the Vatican if he saw me in Rome.
Jesus.
Yeah. How dare you? How dare you make fun of us? I go, mate, I don't need you to tell me that I'm making fun of you. If there was anything that I was doing that was wrong, my dad would knock on would tap me on the shoulder, say, son, you're going overboard. You're being offensive to our culture. I don't need, we're comedians are hypersensitive. We know exactly what we are doing when we say what we say. We know exactly what we are provoking in the minds of people when we say it. Okay. If I thought that what I was going to say was going to offend my parents or my grandparents, I wouldn't be doing it, let alone, doing it. It's just people have taken it the wrong way. And there are people that take it the wrong way, and that's fine. But the percentage of people who take it the wrong way is very, very small. In Italy, it's quite large.
Wow.
But what does that tell you?
Yeah.
Tells you that as a nation, they're very sensitive people, and there's a word for it in Italian, which we don't have in English. I mean, in English it's called sensitive, but there's an actual phrase, a terminology called permalosi. Sono permalosi, very sensitive. They do not like people from outside the culture making fun of them, because they do not see me as an Italian. They see me as a peasant, scrap. We're the children of all the people who had to leave Italy. So to them, they don't look at us in a very positive way. Not all of them, because there are a lot of beautiful people in Italy who love the show and who get it. They get it. They understand it.
Yeah. That's actually interesting. I'm quite taken aback by that. Like, I can understand someone from an inner city suburb that's very progressive and, let's say, quote unquote, woke, being easily offended, but I definitely would not have thought that of Italians from the mainland. But I can understand, based on what you've just, illuminated there, why that is the case. And I definitely resonate with this idea that they don't see you as Italian. Like,
No.
with me growing up in Australia, oftentimes you're seen as a wog, but then I go over to, say, Macedonia and I'm seen as a kangaroo. So I don't really belong anywhere in some respects.
Yeah.
Like, nowadays, how do you identify? And obviously not as a rainbow trout, but to quote your gig on Friday night, but do you just consider yourself in Australia nowadays, an Italian,
I'm an Aussie.
Australian?
Every time I go to Italy, it makes me realize I'm more and more that I'm actually an Aussie. I'm an Italo-Australian, and there's a difference.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember around 2006 when Australia finally qualified for the World
Well,
Cup.
you know what? Can I just hold you there, because my battery's going to about to run out. Let me get my charger, and I'll come back.
stress.
I've got a lot to say about that. Hang on a second. So sorry, mate. So sorry.
No stress. Joe.
Professional. I should have. Okay. All right.
So,
Cut. Take two. What were you going to say?
I was just talking about how, back in 2005, Australia qualified for the
2006.
World Cup.
Oh yeah, 2005. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was November, obviously, for the 2006 World Cup. And that was the first time I could really sort of relate to an Australian national sporting team, because you looked at the team and it was full of Italians, Croatians, Macedonians, just absolutely everything, as well as your, Anglophile Australians as well. It was a true representation of this nation, as opposed to, say, the cricket team where it's all Smiths and Browns and, good luck to them. Hope they succeed, but it's really not relatable to me as a young ethnic guy who grew up in the western suburbs of Melbourne. And perhaps to some degree, I relate more to that national team than, say, the Macedonian national team. And so, going to your point, when you go to Italy, you more and more start identifying as an Australian because of everything you've experienced and the fact that when you are in Italy, they don't even consider you one of their own.
No. And in fact, when Italy played Australia in the 2006 World Cup, that was the first time that I realized, that I was an Australian, because you had kids there who were born in Australia, whose parents were born in Australia, who were waving Italian flags.
Mm.
You're an Australian. Your parents are Australian. You should be waving an Australian flag. No, because obviously Italy is a powerhouse when it comes to soccer. And so you are going to be supporting the winning team. You know, Australia was lucky that they even got there, let alone to the next, the quarterfinals. So uh, that really taught me a lot about human nature. People want to associate with a winner. So they would rather wave an Italian flag, even though they were born in the country and their parents were born in the country. That tells you a lot. But you're right. I mean, I know John Aloisi really well, and I said to him, I wonder what the Italians were thinking when they were playing you guys. They were thinking, well, is there any Australians in this team? Who's Greek? Who's Macedonian? Who's Croatian? Who's half the team were Italian? Like, who are we playing here?
Yeah.
Thought it was funny.
It is funny. It was
Was Bresciano. I think Bresciano was in the team. John
Grella was in the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a few. And then when we played Croatia as well, I think we had about 6 or so Croats in the team. Skoko and Mark Viduka and a handful of others. And Željko Kalac coincidentally led a goal in against Croatia. That was a bit of a suspect one in the third game, but
people think he was going to take.
Yeah, he didn't get a run in the subsequent game against Italy for.
Oh, really? Okay.
Nonetheless, so backpedaling a bit, mate. Earlier, you did talk about how, you were never the kind of person to tell everyone what you were doing. You just went out and did it.
Mm.
And it seems to me that there is a bit of a paradox. Like, regardless of what the pursuit is, be it music, be it startups and business, be it comedy, oftentimes the people that talk a lot about what they're doing are the ones that essentially don't really do anything, and they're just looking for some form of external validation and people to say, oh, good on you, that's great, go for it.
Yeah.
Whereas the people that are really committed, they just go off and do it, and they're the ones that actually tend to succeed more often than not.
Yeah. Okay, so here's an example. So when I was 27 or something, I made a ton of money, and so now I could afford to buy pretty much whatever I wanted to buy, but I would go and buy designer clothing. But the people that I was living with couldn't. So I would go and buy the clothing, keep it in the car. In the middle of the night when everyone's gone to bed, I'd go in the car, grab the bags, come in, take them out of and put them in my cupboard. Because I didn't want them to see me walking in with all this stuff, all this designer label stuff. Now, I wanted that designer label stuff because it was good quality and it was different and I liked it and it fit me well back when I had a good body. And but I didn't need to parade the fact that it was a Versace or was whatever it was. I can't remember. It's probably a Versace back then because they were talking a long time ago, a long time ago. Gucci and Hermes. Gucci wasn't what it is now, and Hermes and all that kind of stuff. So it was probably Versace or Armani or something like that. But I would hide. I didn't want them to come in, see me coming in with all this designer stuff, because I just felt bad. I just felt like, ugh, I don't. It wasn't to show off. It was because I wanted the quality of product. I knew what they would think because this is the thing with money. I don't mind telling you how much money I make, but I don't know how you're going to take it when you find out how much money I make. And so that's the difference, because I've seen so many people change because of money. I've seen it time and time again. People charge you more. Oh, you got the Joe Avati tax. You got the tax where you live, your suburb tax. People know when you're famous, people know, and they automatically think you're absolutely loaded. And so, this guy's got money, he'll pay for it. This guy's got money, charge him extra. I've seen it. And so you've got to be very, very careful how you proceed in your life when, knowing how people react to money. Some people are proud of you. Some people are great. Some people are happy for you. There's a lot of people that are not happy for you.
Yeah. And have you found that as you've gotten older and become more successful that you've had to, I suppose, reconfigure the people you surround yourself with?
Yeah. I've been lucky that a lot of the people that have been like, I can kind of, because we're hypersensitive comedians, and because we see things and we see right through people, we have a great gauge of who's full of shit and who's not. So I didn't really have that many people around me that are not still around me now. But you sometimes still let a few through the you
Through
let
to the wicket keeper.
yeah, and I've helped some people out recently as well, and they've just turned on me. Once they became popular themselves, they just turned, and with no explanation. And that made me realize there's a thing called reverse jealousy. So when you're the only one doing what you do, and you're at this level, and everyone else is coming up, they're looking up to you. Of course, they've got to look up to you. They've got to suck up your ass because you're at the top. When they get to a level where they're near you or above you, they don't need you anymore. And so now they can turn around and look at you the way they really wanted to look at you. That taught me a big, big lesson, in life with people. So yeah, I mean, it's that that's called, to me, it's called reverse jealousy. They really were not happy for you in the beginning. They were just sucking up your ass. Because if they were really happy for you, they would still be your friend. They wouldn't be, trampling on you,
Yeah, I guess it's just a very utilitarian, survival-based approach that they were taking.
Someone warned me about these people too. Someone said, "Oh, you got to watch out for these." I'm not going to mention their names.
Yeah.
Whatever, And I said, "Nah, really?" And they were right. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess power doesn't corrupt, power reveals. So certain people's true character
Yes.
comes out once they acquire
Yeah.
that power and
Yeah,
money and
absolutely.
fame.
People change, and I've tried to do everything possible to keep my feet firmly planted on the ground. And in fact, you know what? I think the more popular I've become, the more I try and go out of my way to make sure that I remain humble. Like, I actually make a point of trying to do that.
How do you go about trying to do that, Joe?
Just by being very conscious that an act that you may commit, right? Okay, for example, you go to a takeaway shop or a McDonald's or something. Most people, they eat their burger, or or like a fish and chips, whatever. Most people would go and have their meal, leave the plate once you're finished on the table, the paper plate or the forks or whatever, and just get up and leave. Now, that's what a lot of people do. If I was to do that, people go, "This guy's so good, too good for himself. He won't even pick up the paper and plate."
Yeah.
I make sure that I do that because, people look at you in a very, very different way than they look at other people. And especially when you are in the spotlight, you have to be very, very conscious. You have to have eyes in the back of your head. You think you have to be constantly on, and you get used to it. You get used to that life, and then you get too used to it, and you forget that people are looking. And people take photos. I've had that, in compromising situations. So you got to be very conscious not to be perceived in a certain way. Now, that's just something that most people do. It's you, and you'd have to be really, really careful how you behave.
Yeah. So
Because
that's
it can be misconstrued. Yeah, it can be misconstrued.
Yeah. So I suppose that's, humility and behaving in a certain way for the sake of public perception. But do you derive a sense of value or benefit just from just naturally just being humble and the behavior of that?
Yes. Yeah. Thankfully, a lot of people say, you've remained the same kind of guy. And that means a lot to me. The people who've known me for a very, very long time. Man, if you saw, there's a guy called Rob Shahady. He's a comedian in Sydney. Go through his phone and have a look at all the photos of where I used to sleep before shows. That'll tell you how humble I am, mate. There's no prima donna with me, and I sleep under tables, on chairs. You can hang me up in a closet, on a rack, and I will sleep there. I'm not a prima donna. And the more and more you go through, what? There was a time where there was about a 2-year period where I became a wanker. Well,
Sorry, mate, you're breaking
Watch it.
up.
America. You know, I thought I was too cool, but you get the reality check. You know, but a lot of people go through. Not, you know, it's not uncommon. You know.
Yeah, no, of course not. So earlier we were talking about the fact that you didn't tell anyone about your comedy, and then you started to sell out shows or at least performance in front of larger audiences.
Yeah.
But I imagine there was a period of teething, as there is, especially with comedy, a lot of bombing, a lot of figuring
Yeah.
out the craft, figuring out your voice.
Yeah.
How, it's a long time ago now. 26 odd years, 27 odd years, almost 30 actually, since you started doing comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But trying to push past that adversity, the bombing, the setbacks, the self-doubt, is that something that you just, got up and just, you know what, didn't work last night, let's just go for it again tonight, just keep pushing, as we alluded to at the start of the conversation? Or was there a certain sort of way you went about dealing with that adversity?
Yeah, so as they say, you're only good as your last show in this business. So sometimes when you bomb, and we all bomb. I've bombed a few years ago. It was at a corporate show. Awful. I had to walk off.
Wow.
There was just the wrong crowd for what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And the jokes work. They work every night. Thankfully, I had another show that night. So you got to get to another show as quickly as possible and get the laughs and
Get
go.
rid of the stench, right?
Oh, yeah. And it happens to everyone. Like all kind of comedians at all levels. And it's kind of scary. You just got to cut your teeth. You got to keep on going. Look, I've been doing this for close to 30 years. I've only found my voice in the last 2. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes any sense. I've only started being a proper comedian in the last 2-3 years. I never used to sit down and write jokes. I used to have them all in my head. I used to do a show. I used to get rid of some, add some, do old gags. I became lazy after a while. I was living that was my rock star lifestyle moments. And it's only in the last, 2-3 years when I pulled my finger out and said, hey, you know what? You got to take this seriously, bro. So I sat down, I wrote a show, I structured a show, I really thought about it. And guess what happened? I won Comedian of the Year. So, it shows that when you have an idea and you work at something, it and you put a lot of effort. Nothing happens without effort. It seems like, you look at Justin Bieber, you look at, what's that other girl's name? I can't remember her name.
Dua Lipa or pop stars isn't my thing. I'm more of an 80s metal fan, so I'm not going to
probably. I don't know who that is. So have you seen videos of Justin Bieber when he was a kid, of Britney Spears? This come along and start singing 20, and all of a sudden they're stars. No. These people have been doing it for a very, very and I get excited when people go, I'm not new, and that excites me. When people have never heard of me, I like it because it tells me that how much further can we go with this. So it was good. It was, nothing comes easy, kids. I mean, I don't know who watches your program, but nothing. That's how old I am. I called it a program. Didn't call it a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my podcast predominantly, we're talking about entrepreneurs, startup founders, and things of that sort. So the whole concept of working really hard at something definitely will resonate with that particular cohort. And you can't expect quick wins and just put out some marketing campaign and spend some money on pay-per-click Facebook ads and the world's your oyster and you're going to be rich overnight. Like, there is a lot of effort that goes into getting the business model right and everything else.
Okay, well then here's something for your listeners, okay? Because you're going to need you're going to need a sound bite. So when I first started becoming famous in Canada, I would sleep in my office. I'd go away. I went away for a weekend. It was in January. I came back to Sydney, turned my computer on. All of a sudden, I had 5 emails. All the subject line: join the Joe Avati party. Join the Joe Avati party was anyone who went to my website who wanted to join my fan club. Now I'd get 3, maybe every 2-3 weeks. When I came back, I was away for 3 days. I came back, I saw 5 emails, join the Joe Avati party. And my immediate thought was some idiot has pressed the button 5 times and I'm going to see 5 emails all with the same person. No, 5 different emails from all over Canada. When are you coming? What do you mean? When am I coming? I've never been to Canada to do shows. Where'd this come from? That's when all my material went viral. So what I did was I slept in my office for the next 2-3 months. And because obviously the time difference, I would sleep during the day, and I would sleep in the office. I'd fall asleep, and every hour I would set an alarm. I'd get up, I'd go to the computer, and there'd be a ton of new emails. I'd look through them all. I'd answer everyone back. And I asked every person, okay, when Joe comes to Toronto, where are all the Italians? Where should he perform? What are the Italian media? What's the Italian areas? Name me. Do you know anyone in the media? Where can we get CDs done? And so all these people over weeks and weeks and weeks would write back to me. And that's how I knew where to go, who to contact, where all the Italians lived. I got my people to do all the research for me. All the time they had no idea it was me. It was, I don't know, it was my Uncle John or someone, they had no idea. And so there's a little soundbite for you.
No, I like that. And I mean, that's very much ties into this idea of, finding product market fit and making sure that you're targeting the right people. In this respect, it was identifying where are the Italians, which suburbs do they live in, which venues should we perform at, and so on and so forth.
There, mate, sorry, cut out.
Yeah, I think I've lost you, mate.
Yeah, sorry, cut out there.
Yeah, you've just
Yeah,
frozen.
you're back now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
I can see you.
Okay, hopefully the connection holds up for the rest of the sesh. But
Yeah.
I think with the time that we have left, I mean, something that you did touch on during your performance the other night was about comedy and not being able to say what you want anymore in today's climate, which I thought was interesting. And this whole concept, of quote unquote woke ideology, it does permeate not just comedy, but the arts. It does permeate the startup ecosystem, the corporate world, and so on and so forth. Now, is it true that you can't say what you want? Because, when I look at Ricky Gervais, I think he posted something a couple of years ago. He's basically said, you can joke about whatever the fuck you like, and some people won't like it, and they will tell you that they don't like it. And then it's up to you whether you give a fuck or not, and so on. It's a good system. So that was Ricky Gervais. What do you think? Like, are you finding a lot more pushback in terms of your comedy? And I know you've been quoted in the Daily Mail, Sky News for some of the things you've said that perhaps don't align with the progressive orthodoxy of the day. But how do you find it as a comedian trying to navigate the current landscape?
Mate, it's
Hello, mate. I've lost you completely.
That's all right. Yeah, I know. It's okay.
Yeah. Maybe I'll turn my video off.
No, you can just say that question again, and because
yeah. So I mean,
yeah,
I'm just turning the video off just so we can kind of hopefully the connection gets better on my side.
okay,
On my side. But
okay.
essentially, the question really was, as a comedian trying to navigate today's
Mhm.
political landscape, have you found it more difficult saying what you want to say?
Okay, so I've never been the kind of comedian to say what I want to say. Right? That wasn't my thing. Now I do. And no one has. Okay, so the things that we could say, 5, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, you just can't say now. But we have our audience. Now, you need to be sensitive about your audience because, you're going to flush out people. Okay, so just by the mere fact that I'm doing my show in English flushes out a lot of people who wanted to see my show in Italian, right? So those people have gone. Now, there are going to be people who don't like what I say because I talk about gender identity politics and the ridiculousness of people who identify as cats, rainbow trout. till you went on your rant. We didn't like your point of view. Isn't that what I'm doing? So you kind of have to navigate that because I've got an audience. Okay, if I was a young comedian starting out, I'm not allowed to do accents unless they're mine. I can't talk about certain things because they're not going to. All the woke people aren't going to book you again. So it's not until you find your audience that you can then do what you want. I know what my audience want to hear because they're going to think the same thing as me. Not everybody. Some people have got a different point of view, and that's welcomed as well. But you have to be very, very careful what you say and how you say it and how you package it. And as you saw in my show, I went right to the edge a few times. Like my comment about, we're not allowed to sing Bar Bar Black Sheep. So if we don't put a stop to this, so we don't offend the refugees, we're going to stop singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Now, that gag is at probably one of the edgiest kind of points that I go, but it is so, you can't help but laugh. At first, people are shocked because laughing is an involuntary reaction. You can't help what you laugh at. So when you laugh, it's like being hooked up to a polygraph machine. It's like a lie detector. You can't help it. That you are expressing what you actually believe, So that tells you what's funny and what's not. The audience will tell you. The audience will tell you by the oohs and ahs if you're pushing it. And that's how I go. And I love to just push it and rev right on the edge and then bring him back. I go right to the edge and then bang, bring him back.
Yeah. Absolutely love that. And
well, you were there. You saw it. What did you think?
Yeah, no, look, I was on board with, pretty much everything you said. And as someone who is a writer and an entrepreneur and just someone who's a curious thinker and believes in, libertarian values and freedom of speech, I think what you said was very much on point. I haven't got kids yet, but something else that resonated with, what you said was, if you want to identify as a rainbow trout, that's your choice, but it's confusing my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Stop confusing my kids. Kids don't need to know about this. What, they're trying to figure out other things in their life. Why do we need to confuse them with all this rubbish,
Yeah. And we are starting to see some pushback at the top. I think it was.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, people are starting to get sick of it. And you can tell. You heard the applause. People are starting to get sick of. But you know what it is, Steve? I'll tell you what it is. People support the underdog because they're hopeless themselves. There's a lot of truth in that. Not everybody, but a lot of, when you realize that you can't make anything of yourself, then what are you going to do? You're going to support everyone else who can't make anything of themselves because that makes you feel better. And I don't like that attitude. Don't tell people what you do when your own bedroom isn't clean, as I think Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson, he says, make your room, make your room first thing in the morning, before you try and
make your bed before you can go out and tell anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was the Netflix CEO, I believe, who said, I've got the quote here, but essentially, depending on your role at Netflix, you may need to work on titles that you perceive to be harmful. And if you find it hard to support our content breadth, Netflix may not be the best place for you. So we're seeing that pushback even from the very top. And that was in response to a lot of the conjecture and controversy related to, say, Dave Chappelle's The Closer special or Jimmy Carr's My Dark Material, with a lot of the, quote unquote transphobic jokes that were made in those particular specials. So we are seeing that pushback. And to your point, we heard it on Friday night at your gig at the Comics Lounge. And as you said, laughter is like a lie detector. And, I've got friends from across the political aisle. As someone who's, published books and whatnot, I have friends that identify left of center. As someone who grew up in ethnic family in the Western suburbs, I have friends who are definitely more right of center and more conservative. But I see people from across the aisle who say things in private that they would never dare say in public, because perhaps they have a job where, mimicking certain talking points is the way you stay in the in crowd and the way you keep your job and the way you avoid getting ostracized, which it's devastating. That's definitely not my idea of liberal values. But as someone like yourself who has your own platform, you have the ability to go out there and actually raise awareness of these issues that perhaps a lot of people in your audience want to talk about, but are just too scared.
They do. And you heard from the applause, sometimes that rant, especially in North America, gets a standing ovation because that's what they do. That we don't really do standing ovations in Australia. In England, they stamp their feet when they approve something in a theatre. That's where the terminology break a leg came from, because they said go out and break a leg, because if you did that well, everyone would stamp so hard that the stage would shake and the legs of the stage would break. And that's where the terminology, where the phrase break a leg came from. In America, they'll give me standing ovations for that. It's really, really interesting how people, but I've then had also people walk out.
Yeah.
I've had people walk out.
Well,
I've had people saying, I can't believe you're inciting violence against transgender people. Well, you were there. Was I inciting violence? Well, did I say go out and beat up someone who's transgender? No. I said, do whatever. It's your body, your choice. You do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But don't be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, it's when you're being ridiculous and my kids. That's what I implore people to be different, because that's what makes my life exciting, is all the different friends that I have, people of all walks of life, and you know what, I ran, before I did the rant, I ran it past a lot of my gay friends who, I thought, well, you guys would be able to, tell me a little bit better. Am I overstepping the mark here? Am I, offend the trans community? They've had, they've had enough of ridiculousness too. People, kids identifying as a cat. No, you're not a cat. You're a kid.
Yeah.
You're human. There's a reason why you look the way you do. You're a human. School for you. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Sebastian Maniscalco has a good bit about a kid in his kid's class who identifies as a lion, who goes by the name of Rory. And, it's essentially, yeah, everything, you got identified there. But yeah. And, as I was saying, people, from what I've come to know, are very much tolerant of all sorts of views. If you want to go off and call yourself whatever you want to call yourself, identify as what you want to identify as, do what you want to do. But the moment you start shoving that stuff down, our throats and our kids' throats and putting it into the classroom, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when you've crossed the line.
That's right. And that goes with everything, with politics, with religion. I'm not a religious person, but if you believe in a faith and it makes you feel good and it's not, not hurting anybody else, sure, do it.
Yeah.
But don't come and try and teach my kid about your God. Okay. Yeah. Leave my kid out of your God. And don't try and, make my kid believe something that you want.
Love that. Very well said.
I will have that discussion with my kid, not you.
Yeah, very well said. Well, in the interest of time, I want to be respectful of your time.
Thank you, Steve.
This one up. Your world tour, as we said, it's in progress at the moment. If people want to learn more, get tickets, find out where you're playing next, they can go to joeavati.com for all the tour dates, pick up some tickets and go down and have a hell of a laugh. The tour is called When I Was Your Age, performing across Europe, Canada, the US, and Australia. So joeavati.com. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Steve. You're a gentleman, mate. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your chat. I hope your listeners got a couple of little nuggets in there.
I'm sure they got more than a couple. Cheers, Joe.
Grazie.